Hi, this is a quick video about teaching vocabulary, or Lexis, as we also call it. So as you're preparing for your TP1, I wanted to run through the Lexis lesson I did at the beginning of the course and perhaps just have a quick but deeper focus on this, okay? So let's get started. I went through a mini lesson with you that was about a holiday, you may remember. So I've started with a question and a picture. I'm eliciting straight away. The students are starting to get engaged and I'm asking questions. I'm not explaining anything at this point. I'm asking another question. And another one, I might say, when do we use these? Or what's this for? What do we call this? Always eliciting. Then I went on to think about if I'm packing a suitcase for a sunny holiday, what could I pack? What clothes are the best for a sunny holiday? So immediately, I'm not really saying very much. I'm asking the questions. I'm eliciting. I'm going to go through the clothing vocabulary. And initially I asked the students, what are these items? Now they could take a screenshot, go into breakout room and discuss and try and figure it out. That would be a really collaborative way to do this. Then when they come back, we could double check. I could either elicit or I can just show them the next slide. If we show them the answers and just get them to have a look and check, it's more concise than asking each student what's number one, what's number two, what's number three. If I show them the answers, then I can also then have a closer look at the vocabulary. I might start drilling, okay? Or alternatively, should I say, we can ask some CCQs. So would I wear number 4, the boots on the beach? Yes, no. So yes, no questions helps me to establish if the students understand this new vocabulary. So I'm saying potentially new, actually, because they may know some of these words or they may not. I might ask, would you wear these on the beach? Number 9, no. I could ask some other questions, would number 11 be useful on the beach? Yeah, probably. Okay. So those CCQ questions, concept checking questions, are yes, no questions, maybe 3 or 4 questions, just about the different items of vocabulary to check that they understand what these items are. Okay. Then I went on to play Kim's game, which is where there were 11 items, but I've removed an item. So they need to guess which item it is that I've removed, okay? So I had 4 rounds of that. I just called them A, B, C, D. You can see I've swapped the pictures around just to kind of make it a bit more challenging. It's called Kim's game, but in my house, it was called the tray game. But, so obviously you can play it with physical items in the classroom, which I've done numerous times with my students, but we can make it on digital, online just as easily. And then I would set a practice task, okay? So I would turn to them and say, right, it's your turn. What would you pack in your suitcase? Go into the breakout rooms, and in groups, I could ask them, I could be specific, tell me or discuss with your partner 10 items you would take on holiday. I might have a couple of different questions. What would you include in a winter holiday? What would you include in a city holiday, for example? Or I could take it down a notch to perhaps considering that not everybody's in a position to go on holiday. I might say, okay, what about a day out in the city? What would you take in a bag, for example? So there's ways that we can differentiate a little bit according to ability or opportunity, different things like that. So that was the lesson that I did, a mini lesson with you. They're the slides that I have. So notice a couple of things. Big font, okay? I've labeled things. I've got lots of pictures. There is hardly any words on there at all. It's all about pictures. And I've put on the parts of speech as well, because these are all nouns. All of those things are really useful in a language lesson. I also use a color background because it's often easier to read it on the screen. Okay, so avoiding white might be helpful. So let's think about what we've included in the lesson. Let's think of what we're doing in order for it to be a successful lesson. So these were the slides that I used in the session with you. So some of these probably are not so applicable for me presenting on a video. But I will say this one, okay, the procedure for teaching vocabulary. We elicit the new language. So I ask them about those items of clothing. I would drill the items of clothing chorally as a group, individually. If I have time, I also, I want to know some of the students, if it's problematic, I'll do it a bit more individually as well, especially a problematic word. Crisps is something that comes to mind. It's quite problematic for a lot of students. So I would definitely try and do it individually as well. Whilst you're online, it's a bit more difficult to listen sometimes. I would ask the relevant concept checking questions. I'm checking that they understand. Would you wear the welly boots on the beach? Boarding is putting it onto the whiteboard. Well, they're on the slides. So this stage would be more in a face-to-face environment. And then a practice activity, absolutely essential. That's going to be the next stage. Now, during that sort of presentation of language, so when I had all the clothes on the screen and all the names of the clothing, I need to check meaning, form, pronunciation. This is key. We must see this in every language lesson or every language stage. So whether that's teaching vocabulary or teaching grammar. Because if this is not covered fully, then the students will struggle to get on with the practice. So we need to see that you're providing or letting the students find out that vocabulary. So either the definitions, so with my pictures, it was crystal clear. So a matching activity with a picture, or perhaps matching even to a simplified dictionary definition is okay as well. They're usually the quickest and the most effective. We don't want to see you explaining it because we're not teaching them about English, but we're giving them the words in order to go and make a list to pack a suitcase, for example. They'll need to know the form. This is how to make the language, how to make that grammar. So we'll have plural nouns, perhaps. We'll have adjectives, verbs. Add the parts of speech. That's a first step. That's really helpful. If it's singular or plural, you might even want to underline the S, for example. That's quite helpful. Anything that shows patterns and visually helps them to be able to remember and replicate that word or phrase. Later on, when we start looking closely at grammar, we want to see in the forms, if it's a tense, positive, negative, and question form. I walk to school, I don't walk to school. Do you walk to school? We want to see these different ways that we use that particular language. With conditionals, we want to see each clause, and then you can name it as well, that it's subject, verb, object, for example, which would be these here. Subject, auxiliary, verb, object. We'll come into those sort of labels a bit later on. We don't need those labels for vocabulary, but we would like to see parts of speech. That's the best label for vocabulary lessons. And as I said, drilling any new words. It's essential that we cover this MFP so that the students have got the tools for the next stage. To help you with MFP, we strongly suggest you analyze the target language. This is the language that you are focusing on in that lesson. So my lesson was the clothing, okay? This was in your lesson plan, and there's a box on the first page about halfway down. Tell us the vocabulary you're going to cover. This is to help you really know it inside out so that you're able to support the students during the lesson. They may have questions. This will also give you confidence with that particular language point. It's not such a big deal that you are confident to teach vocabulary, but when it comes to grammar, this will be important, but also it's something that some trainees may find a bit challenging to get to know, first conditional or past perfect, for example. But vocabulary is less of a hurdle. But here's just some examples, and I've graded them with stars. Okay, think of it like TripAdvisor. Have a look at the last example. This is where this trainee went into the most detail. These are grammar lessons, most of them. This middle one is more vocabulary based. So this is what we would like to see for the Lexis lesson TP1. The word that's in the list that you're teaching and the definition, for example, and maybe any oddities about it, the plural form or different spelling, that kind of thing. Okay, parts of speech as well, which is actually missing from here, but they have included some of the phonetics. If you start to do this, it would be lovely, but it's not necessary in order to pass. Okay, but it's good to have awareness of it. I must I was going to add one more thing. I'll come back to it. I've forgotten it for now. Anyway, that's making a video live and not looking at every possible scenario. Right. Let's move on and I'll come back to that when I remember it. These are some of the slides that we looked in the lesson. It's just things to think about. So how did the lessons I demonstrated, maybe Isha's lesson with the unknown language, think about setting the context, developing the context, how we've elicited, how did we drill, how did we check that the students understand. This was an exercise we did in class, but it is good to think about different contexts. At the airport, what would your context be? Perhaps it's somebody on a flight at a regular time. Maybe it's somebody that's late to the airport. How would that feel? Maybe it's the first time to an airport. And then once you look at that, what would you focus on? Check-in or departures lounge or getting your ticket? What is it that you would like to, what kind of context? If it's a situational lesson, if you're making a complaint to your landlord, where do you start with that? What's the context? Maybe you tell the students that the washing machine has broken in your flat and you've tried to ask the landlord to fix it and they haven't yet. And so, you're just setting the backstory really. Okay. So a few things to think about. And I guess the most vivid context you set, it really brings the lesson alive. Eliciting, we've sort of mentioned that already. It can sometimes be harder to elicit abstract lexis. So do think, when we have lexis and vocabulary where it's picture form, it's so easy to understand it. But some things, what is the picture of, I don't know, emotional, jealousy? I know we've got some linked kind of the green of jealousy and things like that, but some of these sort of abstract words, especially adjectives of feelings and things, can be a little bit more difficult to elicit, but not impossible. Refer to a dictionary to get definitions. You might go down that route when it's not a picture that does the trick. I've explained about drilling, so choral and individual, and you might try a couple of these other types as well. But for the moment, especially for TP1, I would focus on choral. That's the sort of the start of how you would learn and get more comfortable doing that. I won't do too much focus on the CCQs for grammar because it's not a grammar lesson. But if we were trying to check the understanding of the students, how long have you been since Monday? So a present perfect, I have been in London since Monday. We've got some questions to figure out. It's more sort of time-based, when she arrived and things like that. So sometimes CCQs With vocabulary, they're a bit easier. With grammar, they need a bit of thought sometimes, but we're here to help if you want some ideas. So we could think for vocabulary, which is your TP1, positive, negatives. You could try thinking about synonyms. That can sometimes be challenging. Antonyms, and perhaps the lexical sets. There's a couple of things you can kind of consider. They really should be a yes/no question if it's a CCQ. Okay, so it's easy for them to answer it. So a couple of ideas there for you. And I think this might be my final one. Why do we ask CCQs? Because if I say, do you understand? Do you get that? Everything all right? Everything cool? Got that, everybody? You know, all those sort of informal phrases we use. What will the students say? They'll just go, yes, teacher, you know. And I actually don't know. And then whether they've understood. And they'll go in the breakout room and either they can't start the task, they're not sure about the task, they're still trying to figure out even what the lesson's about. So if I see CQ, then I know they've understood the vocabulary and therefore they can move on with the practice. Don't get these confused with ICQs, which is instruction checking questions, which is what I would do just before the breakout. I might ask them, Henk, what are you doing in the breakout room? And he explains it back, the instructions, for example. Don't get those two mixed up. Okay, that's it for now. Good luck with your planning and let us know if you need anything further.